Well, everybody, welcome back to the Trig Podcast of Joey and Gosa TV on this lovely Tuesday morning here in the LA area, Long Beach, California, Los Angeles, June 2nd. Today is Tuesday. Welcome to all those that are watching live, whether you have a 1 on your end or a 0 or a 2. We have love in the air, and we are here because we believe that these are very important times. Just a quick shout out to Javi Lopez, to Alvina. Greetings to you, my friends, and to anybody else who may be watching. We are on 7 platforms and streaming live and always building an audience. I want to encourage you to share this broadcast with your followers. Send a WhatsApp or a Facebook Messenger or a YouTube link to all of your friends, followers. If you're watching me on Instagram Live, thank you for being here. If you are not on Instagram, make sure that you go to my page, David Trigg. If you are not on YouTube, make sure that you go to my YouTube page. That's the best place to watch my show because there you see the playlist and the vault or all the different episodes in a nice orderly form. But whether you're watching me on Facebook or on my page or wherever you are, thank you for being here on this very important time of the year, of the definitely of this country, of the USA, of the US of A. It seems like we put a pause on the pandemic. At least here locally, this is not global. And so the rest of the world maybe doesn't even know what's happening. But here in the US and here in LA, we definitely know what's happening with the racist and horrifying death of George Floyd a week ago yesterday at the hands of a white police officer in Minneapolis. My wife actually grew up not far from that town. She grew up in Edina and in St. Paul, a few cities close to that area in Minnesota, state of Minnesota, up in the northern part of the country, the Midwest. And then she moved here to Southern California when she was 15. But this obviously hits home to a lot of us who are people of color, to those of us who are dark skin, because it really comes down to melanoma. I mean, it's funny to even be talking about these things in terms of color because it really comes down to just the skin, the color of our skin. I was doing a study that I want to show you on the word melanoma and how it happens. I mean, not how it happens, what it is. It happens by the grace of God. And melanoma, right? Is that the right word? I think it is. Or melatona? I might be, yeah, melanoma is cancer, right? So that's not the right word. But I think it's the, let's see here. Melatonin, I think is what I mean to say. Melatonin, yes, thank you. Okay, I always get those two confused. And is that right? Okay, melatonin, no, that's to sleep, right? Okay, what is the thing that I'm thinking of? Melanoma, let's see, skin color. Human skin color. Here we go. Melanin. Yeah, the pigment called melanin. So let me go and actually show you what I'm looking at here. Sometimes, let's see. I want to just show you this idea of human color. Just to, I guess, start with how strange this whole thing is when it comes to color. And then, of course, we'll talk about what's actually happened. So human skin color, look at this. This is from Wikipedia. It says here, skin pigmentation. Human skin color ranges in variety from the darkest brown to the lightest hues. An individual's skin pigmentation is a result of genetics, being the product of both of the individual's biological parents, genetic makeup, and exposure to sun. In evolution, skin pigmentation in human beings evolved by a process of natural selection, primarily to regulate the amount of ultraviolet radiation. Let's try to make this bigger. Penetrating the skin, controlling its biochemical effects. So we're talking about science here. Okay, this is science that we're talking about. This is just how the world works. The actual skin color of different humans is affected by human substances, although the single most important substance is the pigment melanin. That's what I meant to say. Melanin is produced within the skin in cells called melanocytes, and it is the main determinant of the skin color of darker skinned humans. So that's what I'm getting at here. The skin color of people with light skin is determined mainly by how much money they make or how better, no, determined by the bluish white connective tissue under the dermis and by the hemoglobin circulating in the veins of the dermis. The red color underlying the skin becomes more visible, especially in the face, when as a consequence of physical exercise or the stimulation of the nervous system, anger, fear, arterioles dilate. Color is not entirely uniform across an individual's skin. For example, the skin of the palm of the sole is lighter than most other skin, and this is especially noticeable in darker skinned people. There is a direct correlation between the geographic distribution of UV rays, UVR, and the distribution of indigenous skin pigmentation around the world. Areas that receive higher amounts of UVR, generally located closer to the equator, meaning that's why I am dark skinned, and all of the African continent and the Central American countries, as well as if you're talking now Asia, East Asia, Southeast Asia, Cambodia, Vietnam, Laos. That's why all of these countries, we have darker skin because we're poor, because we're not worthy of love, because we're less. No, because of the UVR and because we are closer to the darkest, or not darkest, but the hottest part of the world, of the globe. We're talking about geography here. That's why our skin is dark and yours is lighter. That's why you have black, quote unquote, brown, dark skinned people, because of the location of where our great grandparents were born. Areas that are far from the tropics and closer to the poles have lower intensity of UVR, which is reflected in lighter skin populations. Researchers suggest that human populations over the past 50,000 years have changed from dark skin to light skin and vice versa as they migrated to different UV zones. So maybe the end to racism is we all need to move to Alaska. I'm not being funny. I'm just trying to get to the core issue of racism. We're talking about color. We're talking about pigmentation. We're talking about what happened at the equator thousands, I guess millions of years ago. If I was lighter, I would receive and experience less racism. If you are an Asian person that's whiter, we're talking just color, not socioeconomics, not citizenship, none of that, just simply pigmentation. That word that I can't remember, melanin, you would be less discriminated against. So maybe we all need to move north so that in the next 50,000 years, we will eliminate and eradicate racism. I mean, it's that just crazy to think about, that this is what we're talking about. We're talking about pigmentation. Now, I'm not making light of this. I'm not saying that there isn't more to this, but really it comes down to natural skin color. So let's see here. Let's see. 4, researchers suggest that human populations over the past, as they migrated to different UV zones, and that such major changes in pigmentation may have happened in as little as 100 generations through selective sweeps. Natural skin color can also darken as a result of tanning due to exposure to sunlight. Like my wife was saying, who's white and white skin, she was saying all white people, they want to get darker. And yet those of us that are darker, we are discriminated against because of our skin color. It's one of those ironies in life. Let's see here. Natural, okay. Tanning, exposure. The leading theory is that skin color adapts to intense sunlight irradiation to provide partial protecting against the UV fraction that produces damage and thus mutations in the DNA of the skin. So we're talking about how the human body, the reason why I'm darker than you or than whoever, or I'm lighter, let's say, than someone who's darker than me, it's because my body, I grew up in Central America near the equator, and everyone else that is dark skinned Our bodies were naturally trying to protect ourselves from dying. That's how this whole thing began. In addition, it has been observed that females on average are significantly lighter in skin pigmentation. So now you have the whole black male phenomenon of how and why you see so much prejudice and hate and anger and racism against black males right there. It's just, we're talking about DNA. We're talking about science. This has nothing to do with someone being a lesser human than you, a lesser man than someone of light skin. I know this may seem insignificant to start at this, but this is where my logical, scientific mind goes to. It's to remind us that we're talking about, what's the word again? Melanin. I'm going to think of the word Melanie. There you go. Maybe that's how I remember it. Melanin. If your name is Melanie, my apologies. Not trying to. But anyway, so females, it says, need more calcium during pregnancy and lactation. The body synthesizes vitamin D from sunlight, which helps it absorb calcium. Females evolved to have lighter skin so their bodies absorb more calcium. So the reason why a female may have, if you, let's say you're a woman and you have lighter skin, it's because, again, God, science, all of the above, was protecting your body from absorbing too much sunlight. Or let's say, maybe this is what really I'm reading here. It took the vitamin D from the sun, which, you know, that's where we get vitamin D, and it transformed it, absorbed it into calcium so that it could nurture that child inside of her. We're talking about life here. The social significance, here we go, of differences in skin color has varied across cultures and over time, as demonstrated with regard to social status and discrimination. The act of making distinction between human beings based on the groups, classes, or other categories to which they are perceived to belong. People may discriminate on the basis of age, caste, criminal, weight. Mostly, as we know, it's about color, ethnicity, color. If you were to put a black man that's light skinned and compare that to a black man that's dark skinned, you would have a significant less amount of discrimination that male would suffer because of the melanin in his skin. Look at that picture, an African-American drinking from a racially segregated water cooler colored in Oklahoma City, circa 1939. Crazy, huh? Crazy what is happening. Crazy what we're experiencing. Unbelievable what we're experiencing right now. What we seem to be stuck on for 400, 500 years. That's just here in the U.S., but this is everywhere. Every country, Asia, Latin America, among Africans themselves, in obviously here in the U.S. and the West, Canada, Mexico, South America. Discrimination across how dark you are, it is as old as dirt. And it is wrong because it leads to death. It leads to having a poor man here, as you see, have to drink from a different water cooler because he has, look at that, the amount of melanin on him. I mean, he's close to me, right? Or I'm close to him. I would have been drinking out of this cooler if I had been born in the 1930s. Now, I want to show you a video that was very moving to me. Well, first I want to show you what some of the, especially millennials, I want to say how proud I am of millennials. Young people and also post-millennials, Gen Z and Gen Y. Maybe you see here this, maybe you've seen this on social media, the show must be paused. Maybe if you are, especially on Instagram, you see many, mostly millennials, many of them white, that are going black per se on their screens. There are hundreds and hundreds of pages right now. If you go to Instagram, and if you follow younger people that are mostly white, of course, it could be anyone, but mostly younger people in their 20s and 30s, you'll see a ton of this. The show must be paused, black screens. And it's a way for young people to represent what today we're calling, or these young people are calling, Blackout Tuesday, hashtag Blackout Tuesday, to represent and to support equal justice. I think that's wonderful. I think it's easy for older people like me and you to criticize, oh, well, that's nothing. Do more. Well, that's something very significant that millennials are doing, especially white millennials. I think that's a very powerful and a very, very important thing to see. Not everyone's going to go. Not everyone's going to go out there and protest, but when the heart gets engaged at this level, that's where we can get to a tipping point where we can see real change in this very, very important and serious problem of racism and white nationalism. And now let me say another thing. I was watching an interview by Lil Wayne yesterday, and I don't agree with his stance of how he's never felt prejudice, or that's okay. That's wonderful. It's not been my experience or the experience of most people of color, African American, darker Latinos, etc. I definitely have experienced my fair share of racism based on color, even though I'm eloquent, speak the language, U.S. citizen, married to an incredible woman, a family man, blah, 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 you name it. Doesn't matter because of my melanin, right? That's the right word. It's horrible. It's unfair. It's unjust. Imagine now someone who has less status, let's just call it, in society. Now, who even sets the rules of what that even means? Well, normally those in power. And so I wanted to show you, back to Lil Wayne. He was saying, what was he saying? That he's not really verbal about this and that racism isn't really real anymore. I don't get that. I don't know, what is he thinking? Does he not see what's going on? The pain, the hate, the violence, the racism. Now, before you and I move to the looting, we have to find people that can walk us through this more intelligently and eloquently, and let me say this, more peacefully than what we all are feeling right now. I had another point with Lil Wayne that I forgot. Maybe I'll come back to it. But let me show you a very powerful video of Martin Luther King Jr.'s daughter, Dr. Bernice King, on anger. And I hope the audio comes across, but listen to first that she is the daughter. She was 5 years old when her father, I went to Memphis to that same hotel, Loretto, I think it is called, right? In the second story where MLK was shot, was killed, racist death, racist assassination, as we know. And Dr. King was a man of peace. He was a Baptist preacher, a man of faith, imperfect, absolutely, like every other spiritual leader. Me. But remember, another thing that we can't separate Jesus and him being a man of peace from all this. That's the other thing that I would appeal to all millennials, young people out there, is to look to the faith of your fathers to find a balanced approach. Maybe balance isn't the right word. An ongoing, peaceful approach to your protest. I support you. But the looting is wrong. Now, there's a quote that a lot of young people use these days in terms of looting and destruction by that MLK, Dr. Martin Luther, gave, that said that riots are the language of the unheard. Riots are the language of the unheard. Now, I think that there's a lot of truth in that. But I want you to also hear what Dr. Bernice King here is saying in terms of how that rage that she felt for many years due to the assassination of her beloved father filled her with rage for so long. And how she was saying that this would just happen a week ago got her towards the edge of giving into that rage once again. I think maybe that's the point that I also want to make, is in our way, excuse me, towards peace and reconciliation and actual change, to not give in to the rage. The Bible says it very simply: in your anger, there's nothing wrong with anger, nothing wrong with protesting. Do not sin. In more modern terms, that's called nonviolence. Nonviolence. And then I'll tell you a little bit about how I've practiced nonviolence. So let's see if we can listen in here to this video. Okay. I have to do a few things before we can hear it. Do maybe a little bit of that, a little bit of this, and we can hopefully... Nope.
Calling us together.
Still not heard. Okay, there it is. Okay, hold on.
This is a tough moment. And if I might take one liberty to just say, I've obviously been in the place of the daughter, George, 6-year-old left without her daddy, who was killed senselessly, as my father was assassinated, senselessly. It sent me on a journey of anger. And I fought that demon alone. And I fed up. As I stand in this moment and I look at my journey, I have to make an appeal to my brothers and sisters, because I realize that the only way to get constructive change is through nonviolent means. You know, a lot of people have been using my father's words. Sometimes I get a little upset when people do that and co-opt those words and take them out of context. But I realize that he gave his life to this nation. He was a son of this state and of this city, born on the soils of this city, on Auburn Avenue. But he said to us, riots are the language of the unheard. And the part we often miss when people use it is the part about the unheard. This is a time when we all have to listen. We have to listen to the cries that are coming out of the hearts and the souls of my young brothers and sisters and all of the others that are in the streets of America right now and in our city. But if there's anything I can say to them as they cry out to look at these changes, because the changes have to happen. We can't go back to yesterday. We can't keep doing things like we've been doing it in this nation. We've got to deal with systemic racism and white supremacy once and for all. But the only pathway I know to do this is through nonviolent means. It is a proven method. It did not fail my father and them. As many people who think it failed, it did not fail them, because one thing about it is when you really understand it and really practice it, it brings about the results. So right now it's about what is the end goal. The end goal is we want change and we want it now. But change never comes through violence. It is not a solution. Violence, in fact, creates more problems. It is not a solution. Nonviolent way is the way, because the means and the ends have to be consistent. We will never get to the end of justice and equity and true peace, which is not merely the absence of tension, but the presence of justice, unless we do it through nonviolent means. And so I'm just speaking from my heart now and saying, I feel you. Trust me, I feel you. I've been close to the edge this time. But I can't go back to all that I felt inside and the rage that was inside that wanted me to destroy people and destroy lives as Martin Luther King's daughter. Because I know that the only way to get what we really want and really get it, and not just crumbs, is through nonviolence and peace. And so please, let's stay focused in that way. And remember, everybody is not on the same page. There are people who would try to incite a race war in this country. Let's not fall into their hands and into the trap. There's another way. So in the name of Martin Luther King Jr., from the soils of Atlanta, Georgia, and from the 5-year-old girl who lost her daddy to gun violence senselessly at the hands of law enforcement. Let's do this the peaceful and nonviolent way to deal with the evils and the conditions of our time. But I will say, as he said, and as I Have a Dream speaks, if we go back to business as usual, we're going to be in trouble. Let's not go back to business as usual. Let's deal with these issues that people are crying out of their soul and their spirit, the conditions that have led to this kind of action.
So very powerful, as you can see there, words.
Need a freelancer? Go to Fiverr.com.
Dr. King's daughter. I want to comment on a few things that she said there that I think are very powerful, but I also want to first give you a little bit of a glimpse into my own story with nonviolence and peace. So maybe this will help some of you out there process what all this means in terms of your feelings of rage against the looters, your feelings of rage against the cops, etc., just rage in general. First of all, let me say that rage is of the devil. That rage and destruction and violence is of Satan. I mean, that is what we have to start with, that peace is the way of Jesus. Jesus is not the king of hate or of violence, right? And so, but how do we manage the rage? Now, I think that Dr. Bernice is a great example of, like she says, I fought that demon a long time ago. And I love how she uses the word demon, because anger, hate is demonic. Now, let me say, because you and I are human beings, if you're in the U.S., what are most people feeling here right now? Anger, hate, violence against, depending on your color, depending on your politics. Let's be real here. If you are on the conservative side, Republican, you're feeling hate against the looters and those thugs, as the president said. And if you are on the, quote, liberal side, I guess as some would say, then you're feeling hate against the cops and against, now, who's right? It's not about who's right. The minute that you become this dualistic person who you're seeing everything as bad or good, you've already lost the battle. You have to think in the middle. You have to think above hate. You have to go to peace. Now, what Dr. Bernice said here that I think is a good example for us is that she was in her hate for many years. Her father, she was 5 years old, was killed when she was a little girl. I was taken, quote unquote, from my home against my will, you could say, when I was 8, 9 years old because of a war. Very similar stuff, violence, hate, crime. And I have suffered the consequences. For me, it hasn't been hate. It has been trauma that I've been dealing with for many years. And so those scars remain for those of us that have been through some sort of traumatic experience. Now, as she says, this brought her close to the edge of going back to that place that she left. But because of her training, because of her father's example, I don't know her faith experience, but because of her God, I hope it's It's something that she believes in because of her faith in Jesus. I do not know. She has committed herself once again to nonviolence. Now, in terms of my own path with nonviolence, I grew up with war, but I was raised in a nonviolent home. Not in a, I want to run, which is very Latino, very Hispanic. I just want to ignore what's happening. I just don't want to see it. I don't want to deal with it. It's not, thankfully I'm not a part of this. That's very Asian, very Latino, is to run from these things that don't deal with us, right? And yet if you are a dark-skinned Central American like I am, then this is real, right? And the big lips, the big nose. Again, we're talking about this beautiful body that God gave us. Nothing dealing with the soul, with the mind, with the heart, with intention. And so when I began to see the peaceful ways of my father, especially, even when I was a young boy, I began to notice, and he began to lead me down this path of nonviolence. Then, about 10 years ago, I came to a beautiful community of faith that literally practiced nonviolence. Shout out to Susan, Dr. Susan, and all of the UUC staff. They taught me, I can now understand clearly, the practice of nonviolence among kids. This community of faith had a center called the Peace Center that was centered around the nonviolent ways of MLK, of Nelson Mandela, of Mother Teresa, of Gandhi, of all of of course, of Jesus, of all the heroes. And at the end of the day, because we are people of faith, and this was a church that I was working with, Jesus is our hero, and he is the ultimate example of divinity, of God in human form, being a man of peace, a man of sorrows, that is familiar with our ways. Now, the path towards nonviolence, from rage and hate and anger, is a spiritual discipline. It's not something that just happens. Your flesh, your anger, again, Dr. Bernice King said it clearly, will lead you and me towards hate and rage and division. That's what's normal, and that's what we see on your Facebook feed, when you're hanging out with your friends. That's what we're experiencing. But what is refreshing and what is needed right now are people and groups and young and old, white and black, brown and Asian, to rise towards Jesus and his principles of nonviolence. That's the answer. That's, where's my bell? That's what it comes down to. And the journey towards that, and the change that must come, and the systemic changes, and voting for the local government, your mayor, your city council, your president, ultimately in November, who you believe represents the way of peace, not of hate, not of violence. That's the way forward. And we're talking about a very evolved individual here. We're talking about a spiritual man. We're not talking about some sort of angel or some sort of divine creature. We're talking about you and me becoming really what we're called to be. People of faith. People who believe in Jesus. And I'm going to say something maybe a little controversial. It is the Christian faith, the Jesus people, that are the ones that have the most responsibility to be the examples in this. Not your Jewish neighbor, not your Republican neighbor, or your Democrat, or your Muslim, or none of that stuff. Now, all of us need to follow the example of Jesus, and I do believe that Jesus is the perfect example of peace. After all, Isaiah called him the Prince of Peace. And I know that white conservative evangelicals have been moving towards violence. Latino people have been moving towards violence. I'm talking about politics and political violence. Young people have been moving away from political violence and towards activism, social causes. I had a little old lady, when I mentioned on something here, social justice, she's like, "Are you a communist?" This was just a few years ago. I'm like, "A communist? I come from a communist or socialist country, but I don't view my actions as far as politics." I think that the greatest, I don't want to get too church talking here, but the greatest sin of the church, of the Christian church, the evangelical Christian church, which I adore, which is, the word evangel means good news. It's not political. It's not a white, black thing. But our greatest sin is we've become known for our politics more than for our love. Not in everything, but this is part of the systemic problem. I think another thing I want to say, that maybe this was what Lil Wayne was saying. Yeah, this was it. He was saying, let's not involve everyone or blame every white person as a racist, or every black kid as looting, or every person over 70 as racist, or every young person under 20 destroying the corner market. That's what hate does. It begins to discriminate. It begins to lump everyone into nice, easy to attack groups. The reptile brain, our simple brain that we have, it wants to be safe. And in order to be safe, this is now neuroscience and psychology, the things that I study a lot. We begin to say, okay, who's at fault? Who can I blame for my anger? And sometimes it's warranted. When someone kills your father, 46-year-old George Floyd, or kills your father, Dr. MLK, like Bernice said, you're going to live with a lot of hate in your heart for many years. But then I love what she said. I fought that demon a long time ago. A few other things she said is violence creates more violence. That's why this has to stop. All this violence that we see on the streets of LA, of Long Beach, of our whole nation here in the US. She said, I felt that rage very close. She said, I came close to the edge to feel that rage once again. But she said, I'm not going to go back. I fought that demon a long time ago. She said also that in terms of her father's quote of riots are the voice of the people, or are is that what she said? Riots are the noise of the unheard, or the actions of the unheard, or the voice of the unheard. She said to focus on the unheard part, that these individuals, these people, these young, mostly men and women who are out there protesting, they are unheard. And I love that it's white and black and brown and Asian out there. There was an Asian police officer. The second one that we mostly saw in the video is an Asian man. Why do I bring that up? Because we have to talk about that. I have no idea who this young man is. A young man. I don't know his life, his history. He hasn't been detained, nor have the other three officers. This touches every one of us. Asian, black, white, Latino, Middle Eastern, all the rest, Southeast Asian, all the rest of the groups. And so we have to talk about that. And like she said, listen to the voices. We have to listen to the voices of those who are discriminated against. For those that are those of us that are older, we don't talk about this as much as we should. I didn't talk about the racism that I felt mostly in the white evangelical church for 30 years. That's just my reality. To this day, there are blocks in my mind, in my head, in terms of blocks, meaning it's still raw, is what I mean to say. And like Dr. King's daughter here, I am in the process of fighting that demon. And for the most part, I've released, forgiven. But before you can call someone to go forgive or to reconcile, you have to give that person a voice. Now, the great news is that young people today are very comfortable speaking up. And that's why I think that this generation of young people. They're rising up at the right time, and I'm so proud of that. My daughters, our son, your kids, my kids, anyone under 30, you could say, or maybe under 40. This is your time. And I love what President Obama said. I think it was yesterday. He talked about how proud, and I feel the same way, I am of young people. I'm not talking about that minority, that 10%, 20%, 2% who are destroying our cities. That has to stop. And I think that it is being stopped as we speak. I hope it is. I haven't wanted to see the news today. But we have to be conscious of all that's happening. Another quote here from Dr. Bernice. She said, "What is the end goal? Change has to be the end goal." I love that. What are we doing? Are we going to go back? And this is what Lil Wayne said, I think, is we're going to just go back to the same old, same old. I mean, we've been dealing with this stuff for many, many years. This just happened to Ahmaud. I forget his last name. Bradbury, just 2 months ago when he was shot down for running in the wrong part of town. I mean, Trayvon Martin, you name it, Rodney King. I mean, Adam and Eve, Seth, Abel and his brother Seth, right? Yeah. Abel killed his own brother, murdered him. The other way. Seth killed his own brother. So death and murder has been a part of our existence from the beginning of times. What is the solution? What is the path forward? What is the end goal? We have to stop that. There has to be a spiritual revolution. And I think that this whole virus, as well as now I know that this race wars per se is only here in the U.S., so the whole world isn't per se dealing with this. And thank God in some ways that the whole world isn't going up in flames with racist hate. So, but here in the U.S., this is our journey. We're dealing with these two major crises of health and education and finance and all that means to our psyche and to our rage against this and blah, blah. And then second, now this. Why? The only thing I can think of is it's an inward invitation, and not invitation, it's like a slap on the face to look within. Yesterday, I read the Lord's Prayer on our broadcast. Maybe you saw that. You can go check that out. That's why, again, I'm a big YouTube guy, because there you can see all the videos, whereas on Facebook, it's just a mess. You can't. Plus, the reason why nobody watches me is because it's easy to just go on to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. It's just, that's what Facebook is about. But anyway, the point is not that. The point is that you have to move towards that end goal, systemic change. And I'm not smart enough to know exactly what that means, but I know it means that we have to create a whole new world, a whole new system. This fills me with rage at times. I'm not going to lie. Things that are happening in the systems that I'm a part of right now that are unfair, that are racist, that are discriminatory, that I have tried to fix, I have tried to speak into, but it's a big problem. It deals with the same old things, money and power. Really, that's where it all comes down to, money and power. And I would say I would add a third thing, and that's spirit, the inward journey. Because you and I can have all the money in the world and all the power in the world, and without Jesus, we will sin. We will destroy our homes and our families and ourselves. That's what history has shown us. Adam and Eve, what was their sin? They wanted power or knowledge. And the minute that they took that knowledge and that power on themselves, by themselves, on their own, that's when their lives were destroyed as they knew it. And they left paradise. And that's what we see these days. And so if you had all the money in the world, young person that's protesting, and if you had all the power in the world, the only way that we're going to do right is if we are filled with the power of Jesus Christ and the Holy Spirit, the angel of peace, the power of the Holy Spirit, not with dark magic, not with law of attraction, not with Gnosticism, not with atheism, not with science or technology, but with the power of Jesus Christ, who is the Prince of Peace. Just look at all the heroes around you, your parents, MLK, Mother Teresa. All these men and women were people of deep faith in Jesus Christ. You can't deny the fact. Are there mistakes that the church has made? Certainly, of course. But we're not talking about that racist Christian friend that you have, or that racist black man that you have, because again, this goes across the board. Or that angry Asian, or that messy, loud Latino, or that whatever, that abusive Asian boss that has the sweatshops at the swap meet that pays the Mexican employees $8 an hour. All those injustices are real. What, you to think I don't know those things? I mean, that's how I grew up again. I grew up with all of these realities around me. And my choice has always been to be a man of peace. Hello, Silvio. Buenas tardes. Buenos días. Hola, un saludo. Gracias por estar aquí, por su apoyo. Gracias. And so we have to continue to be people of peace. We have to continue to be men and women of peace. Estoy orando, como me decía en el comentario Silvio, por el doctor Parajón, ¿verdad? Sí, orando por su salud. Sí, he estado pendiente de eso. He visto los updates. Gracias. Gracias por su apoyo y su sintonía. Gracias por todo. Yo sé que usted siempre está aquí viendo. Gracias por su apoyo. But talking about this powerful need for peace, it's something that comes from the heart. We have to do this together. We have to come together. My beautiful wife, she is an activist. She is, if you're into the Enneagram, she's a 1. They call them the reformers. That's why I love that woman. I'm a 3 and she's a 1. I'm an achiever. I get things done. And then she's a 1. She's going to go out and reform things. And so we are a beautiful combination. That's why we have always felt like we were twins and soulmates at the same time. She went for a run yesterday just to process all this, and to cry out to God, and to really calm her rage down. The 8, 9s, and 1s, if you're thinking again, psychology and neuroscience, the 8, 9s, and 1s in the Enneagram are in the gut triad, and their main quote unquote vice or sin, or where their flesh goes, is towards anger. And I'm not going to say that that's all bad, but that's just what those 8, 9s, and 1s, that's where they'll feel it. The 2, 3s, and 4s, they'll be heart people. They'll want to help, compassionate types. And then the 2, 3, 4s, then the 5, 6, and 7s will be logical. They'll be reasoning, and I'm in the head triad. So we're reasoning things. So if you can see, my streams are logical. I'm trying to use my quote mind, my genius mind, or my little P mind, to try to not make sense of it, because it makes no sense, but to try to go with reason, even though for all of us, we want to react. Or maybe some they want to fall asleep, or hide, or run. Or maybe they want to give in to fear, and they are afraid of all this. All things that I have felt. Rage, I have felt it, like you and I. Fear, yep. Shame, I wish I was doing more. I wish I could stop all this. Those are all the triggers that we have. And so we have to be aware. But my point with all that is that when she went for a run, she came and she made a sign on some cardboard boxes and put it on our fridge, this huge sign that says no fear. It says no violence. And I love at the end, she wants to make a t-shirt of it, the whole thing. And she probably will, with our daughters who are so creative and, they're into all that stuff. She wrote at the bottom, "We are one." And that came from my message on Sunday, where I ended my talk with 1 Corinthians 12. It says that we are one. And really that is the way forward, is we are one. If you are a woman of faith, if you are someone who connects to what I'm doing here, to this channel, I know we don't have, like I said, many people on your end. There may just be a one. It might just be you. That's okay. Do I wish that 3,000 people were hearing this message? Of course I do. So help me out. Help me to get the word out so that more people can hear this message of peace. You know, I'm not a ranter or a raver, and that's why people quote, you know, they're like, oh, whatever. You know, if I was here yelling and screaming or pro-Trump or pro-Obama, I would have millions of people watching. But because I'm trying to be a man of peace that's more logical, not that I don't feel the rage. As I said just a little bit ago, there is such much rage inside of me at times about some of the injustices that I'm experiencing as we speak. I have to sometimes take a breath because there is that in me, that violent part of me that is in all of us. But by the grace of Jesus, I am learning to, I'm not going to say control that, but to find nonviolent ways to try to address some of these systemic issues. Now, I was watching another video yesterday by a English journalist, British journalist, a very eloquent man. I don't think in the US, I mean, in the UK, they call them African Americans, right? So a black man, that's all I can say. I don't know what else to call a British black man. So, but he was talking, he's a doctor of this and that, a young person, maybe in his 30s. What a bright man. Wow, I want to be him. And he was saying how for him, it's not about voting for the right person. It's about breaking the system as we know it and starting afresh. And you know what, where my mind went to immediately is to Revelations 21. I preached about this 2-3 weeks ago. The need for a new earth. I agree with him. I agree with him. That this idea that we're going to just tweak while the powers remain in power, while the same people, the same attitudes remain in power and control over us or over injustice, that is not, that's what we've been doing. Our systems have to be broken as we know them, and they have to be rebirthed into one new earth with values of equity, of nonviolence, and of love and peace. And racism and control and good old boys club and those thugs and those racists and my rights and you're not a part of my country and any of that, of those attitudes that this country has been plagued by. Or, okay, that was just my dad. That's how he spoke. Well, then you need to say publicly, Lord, forgive my father and forgive me, Lord. And you need to teach your son, your 40-year-old son, your 20-year-old son, your 8-year-old son, this is not the way forward. That's not how we speak about a human being that has, has a darker melanin than you because they grew up close to the equator. And that was how the body itself protected itself from cancer. That's why I started with all of that stuff about our skin and just the science of it all. Not only that, but then the gospel commands us, urges us to love one another. It urges us to be people of faith, to be people of love, to be one, as I said. So back to finish my story of my beautiful wife. She has this beautiful sign out there. It says, we are one. And I guess I want to just stay with that thought. We are one. We are one. But at the same time, do I believe that the current people in power, in government, and all the systems are the ones that are going to lead us forward? No. I don't believe it. It's just, and maybe I'm one of them. Maybe we're just too gone. Our time has come and gone. I don't know if I'm one of them. Perhaps. Maybe I'm a part of the problem too. But let me just take you back to the Bible, which is my guide. Remember Moses? Moses, the great prophet of God. He got to the top of the mountain. He was 120 years old. This is in Deuteronomy 30. I also spoke on this a few weeks ago. If you want to listen to my talks, go to YouTube again. Look up my name and you'll see all of my talks that I give on Sundays. Meditations from the scripture on these very issues that are very relevant to us, that we need, and in a context of peace and love and hope. But Moses gets to the top, and God says, Moses, you've done a good job, but you're not going in. First of all, you're too old. Just down, bottom line. And second, meaning you're going to die soon. And second, you're too angry. You are a part of the problem, Moses. And so I'm going to use Joshua, who has been under your tutelage and under your guidance for 50 years, who is the person I've chosen. Now remember, Joseph was afraid to death. He's like, no, please, no, not me, God. And then what did God tell? Well, two things. First, what did Moses tell Joshua? Did I say Joseph? I meant Joshua, excuse me. Be strong, Joshua. God is with you. And then, of course, a classic Joshua 1. What did God say to Joshua? Be strong and courageous. As I was with Moses, I will be with you. That's called a new earth. I think that there may be 90% of people in power right now that need to step aside and let the Joshuas lead the way in money, in church, in education, in politics, in all of the major systems, in health, in media, in music, in art, online. We need to let young people lead the way. Not any young person, because there are many young people that are the identical representation of the evil of their fathers and their grandfathers. But if you are chosen by God, this is a distinction. Moses didn't just go with every young man out there. He chose Joshua out of a crowd of millions, and he tested him. And Joshua picked him out through the power of God. So there's a process here. It's not just, okay, who wants to lead? No. God has to call you through those currently in power, if they are men of God. If they're not men of God, then you're absolute. You're obsolete. But if you are a man of God in power, 120 years old or so, and you know you're not called to do this, then you have to begin to say, Lord, who? And you have to be thinking about not passing the baton, but just getting out of the way and let God lead. And you have to make sure that whoever is left is someone who is a man or a woman of peace, and that has the power, the money, the buildings, who has the economy in their hands, who has the votes, who has the power to choose and to build and to sell and to lift and to rise and to educate and to, we're talking about the systemic needs. We're talking about a new earth. This is what the virus is teaching us. This darn thing isn't going away, is it? This is a new earth. All this horrible mess, I still can't get over it. I'm getting over it more and more, but okay. I was asking Rochelle, how do we go out on a date and eat? Do we just feed each other underneath? And she's like, no, you take the thing off. She went out to lunch yesterday with her friends. And I'm like, how did you eat? I feel so just like, why do we do this? Same thing with racism and money and violence and trillion million dollars, $1 trillion companies like Facebook and Amazon. The poverty of our people, of our seniors, of our immigrants, of our children. And yet, who has the money in most organizations? The same people. Or their kids, or their kids, or their kids. It's time for you, old person. I'm not being prejudiced against old. I consider myself one of them. Maybe I need to get out of the way. But here's the thing. It's not just get out of the way. You have to ask the Holy Spirit. Holy Spirit, who are the Joshuas around me? Who are called by God? I feel like I am called by God to lead the way. But as I said, Lord, now here's the thing. If you don't want to get out of the way, God will take you out of the way. That's the irony of it all. I think Moses would have kept going if God didn't stop him. So you don't want to get out of the way, God will. God forbid a health or any horrible thing that may happen to us. I don't want to die of a heart attack, of a disease, or of this virus. Nobody does, right? But my point is, God will do what he needs to do to bring us to that new earth that is coming. That includes the power, the money, the health, the buildings, the economy, the technology, the health department. All of the systems of this earth have to be undone, broken, we could say. They have to die because of the sin that's built into them, and a new earth has to emerge. A new heaven and a new earth. In Jesus' name. Well, to all my thousands of viewers, I don't know why I keep harping on that. I guess my ego is still very much alive. No, I do wish that more people would hear this message, because I think that even if in this hour and a half there's 1 minute of something useful, it's 1 minute of something useful. So help me. Maybe most of you are going to watch this after the fact. Will anyone watch 1 hour and 10 minutes? I look at my analytics. People normally watch like 3 seconds, then they bounce. It's okay. I understand that there are more fiery things to go and watch out there. But I'm not going to be someone I'm not. I'm not going to be yelling at you here or at those Obama people or those Trump people. I'm not going to yell and scream. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to use my logic. I'm going to use my mind. I'm going to look to Jesus to be a man of peace and do it in my own way, and hopefully attract a tribe that resonates with my message, and trying to be a man of peace, even though there's so much rage, like Bernice said, that is within us. But I fought that demon a long time ago, and I don't want to fall back into that rage that is so near to us all. May God give us his peace. Thank you so much for watching. Share this broadcast. I'll see you next time.